Ladies and gentlemen and candidates, welcome to the 2020 All Candidates Forum for the Provincial riding of the Columbia River Revelstoke. My name is Dean Majette, former publisher of the Columbia Valley Pioneer, and I will be moderating tonight's discussion. This evening's forum is scheduled to run 1.5 hours. The candidates will be on screen for the duration of the forum. Candidates will be answering questions submitted by constituents. The questions submitted have been edited by the moderator for clarity and formatted so that all candidates may respond. Questions dealing with federal or municipal issues were set aside. Some questions posed to the candidates may be an amalgamation of a number of different submissions that deal with the same general topic. No questions will be accepted from the floor. As such, the chat function has been disabled. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, with the speaking order rotating through the candidates. A 30-second time warning will be given. If the candidate is about to run over their allotted time, I will ask the candidates politely to wrap up their thoughts quickly. During the forum, there will be opportunities for open debate amongst the candidates. These open debates will limit candidates to 1-minute intervals to respond with a 15-second time warning. We ask all candidates to conduct themselves in a professional and respectful manner befitting a representative of the people of Columbia River Revelstoke. Each candidate will begin with a 2-minute introduction, followed by 3 questions per candidate on party platforms and proposed policies. All questions for this segment of the program have been provided to the candidates at least 24 hours in advance of tonight's forum. At the end of this series of 9 questions, an open debate will commence for a period of 10 to 15 minutes. One candidate, in rotating order, will be recognized by the moderator during all open debate segments. The second part of tonight's program will feature additional questions from constituents. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond, followed by an open debate of up to 5 minutes. Only some of these questions will have been provided to the candidates in advance. Others will prompt the candidates to think on their feet. The evening will conclude with 2 minutes of closing remarks from each of the candidates. The candidates hope that everyone exercises one of the most important freedoms that we enjoy, to choose our leaders. The party that earns the right to form government will set priorities for spending over $60 billion of your tax money in the coming fiscal year. Please take the time to vote and encourage family and friends to do the same. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Columbia Valley Chamber of Commerce for organizing the event, Andrea Tubbs of Swansea Communications for producing the event, and the Kootenay Association of Realtors for sponsoring tonight's forum. A quick note to our audience that you can control how you see the layout of your screen. For improved viewing of each candidate, you can double-click on any of the candidates to enlarge their image at any time. The speaking order was established by random draw, and we begin with opening remarks, starting with candidate Boyer of the Green Party, followed by candidate Charlet, representing the NDP, and candidate Klofuchuk, representing the Liberals. Candidate Boyer.
Thank you for that introduction, Dean, and I would like to acknowledge the riding sits on the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, Sinixt, Kiskanook, and Secwepemc nations. As mentioned, my name is Samson Boyer. I'm the Columbia River Revelstoke Green Party candidate, and I'm running because I believe that we can do politics differently. Not only that we can, but the Green Party has demonstrated through these 3 years of coalition government that we can do politics differently, and we can do it better than we have in the past. I believe that we need and can elect honest politicians, and I hope that tonight, ladies and gentlemen, as we answer your questions, that you can see who is the best MLA and will work the hardest for the people of Columbia River Revelstoke. To start this off, I would like to thank Nicole and Doug for stepping forward. I think that it's incredible. We have a great selection of candidates running, and I just hope that we can all work towards a brighter future. Thank you.
Candidate Charlet.
Great. Hi, my name is Nicole Charlet. I'm a city councillor, small business owner, and your BC NDP candidate for Columbia River Revelstoke. I'd also like to acknowledge and honor 4 nations on whose traditional land we live, work, and play here in Revelstoke: the Sinixt, the Ktunaxa, the Secwepemc, and the Selks. I've been really enjoying the conversations I've been having as I travel the riding. The stories are varied, but there are definitely some common threads: affordability, staying safe, access to healthcare, mental health supports, childcare, and housing. We shared our optimism about the progress made in the last 3 years and our ideas of how we can move forward together. I put my name forward in this election because I believe the BC NDP are the right team to ensure that we build a recovery from COVID-19 that includes everyone, not just those at the very top. For too many years under the BC Liberals, people in rural communities like ours were largely ignored when it came to investments in essential services. We can't go back to the way it was before and throw away the progress we've made on issues like $10 a day childcare, the opioid crisis, and the environment. Instead of tax cuts that benefit the wealthy, like Andrew Wilkinson is proposing, we need to keep investing in people, better healthcare for our seniors, skills training for workers, and affordable housing for families. We're already seeing the impacts of climate change in Columbia River Revelstoke, and we owe it to future generations to do our part. The BC NDP worked closely with Dr. Andrew Weaver to develop Clean BC, the most ambitious climate plan in North America. Instead of a patchwork of legislation and policy, we have an economic opportunity to build back better and tackle climate change while creating good jobs. The BC has shown we're ready to listen to the experts. After all, why invest in world-class education if you're not going to listen to the innovation that comes from it? It's time that Columbia River Revelstoke had a seat at the table in Victoria.
Thank you. Candidate Klobuchar.
Well, thank you very much, Dean, and good evening, everyone, and welcome. And thank you to the organizers as well. I'm frozen, so I hope I'm not on your end, but I just also want to recognize that we are in the shared traditional territories of the Shuswap and Aqiskunuk First Nation and also the Métis people as well. I ran in 2013 and 2017 because I heard from people that their voices were not being heard at home or in Victoria. And I was elected in 2017, as you know, as your MLA. Since then, we've been successful in working on so many issues together. And each day, I'm really inspired by the people that I work with and see every day. And, you know, I think back to 2017 when I was campaigning. And I remember someone in Revelstoke asked me, what are you going to promise us? Well, I promised two things. I promised I'd work my tail off, and I promised I would never lie, and the rest we'd work out together. And we've done exactly that, and I've kept my word, and I'm very proud of the work that we've been able to do together. And I really say together because it takes a community to do this work and lead together. And we are indeed a remote rural riding. That's where we're classified by, and we've got lots of unique communities and lots of unique issues. And I've worked really hard, not only at home here, but in Victoria, to make sure that the rural lives and the needs are being recognized. I'm known as a fighter, not only at home, and I'm a bit of a scrapper when it comes to Victoria. And I'm very proud to say that during the Premier's estimates in May of 2018, Mr. Horgan noted that, and I quote, "I commend him for his tenacity on behalf of his constituents," unquote. So I'm very proud of that I was recognized by the other side for doing that. And I also was the co-chair for the Rural Caucus Committee for our party. So we meet and we talk about those rural issues. So I'm really honored to serve and to be here tonight, and I really look forward to the dialogue. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and welcome to everybody. My time's up.
Thank you. The first policy question goes to candidate Charlet. Describe the NDP's proposed changes to the way healthcare is delivered in BC.
Great. I think we can all agree that John Horgan and the BC NDP have done a fantastic job guiding us through this completely unforeseen health crisis that is COVID-19. We need to keep BC moving forward and build on that progress that we've made so far. A big part of that is following the expert advice of Dr. Bonnie Henry, not trying to tell her how she does her job. Now, John Horgan's plan includes a record $1.6 billion investment in healthcare to fight COVID-19. That includes a whole bunch of different parts, but including hiring 7,000 frontline healthcare workers in those long-term care and assisted living spots, where 9 out of 10 of those senior care homes were understaffed under the BC Liberals. people in rural communities like ours were largely ignored when it came to any investments in essential services. Because when you looked at the economic value of it, it made more sense to centralize. But we all know what it's like to drive those highways in the winter, especially if it's for a 15-minute consult appointment. This is where the lessons we're learning from the pandemic are really going to open up some possibilities on how we can improve these things. And we've already got some of these pieces in place, right? These care networks are going to make it easier for patients in a rural area to call in with their local practitioners in order to provide those virtual visits along with that local care. This is that collaborative framework where we listen to the experts, we listen to the users on the ground, and we make decisions that make sense for that social value, not just the economic bottom line.
Thank you. Candidate Klofuchuk, the BC Liberals propose eliminating the provincial sales tax for 1 year, then reinstating it at a lower rate. Explain the rationale behind this policy and the benefit to British Columbians, as well as the impact this will have on small businesses that collect the PST.
Well, thank you very much, Dean, for that question. And you're absolutely right. We are proposing a PST cut for the first year, and then 3% when it comes back. And it's interesting that you have to look at this from a pandemic perspective and an economic crisis. We haven't been in this crisis like this since the end of World War II. And we've got to provide what people call stimulus spending. We've got to get people back to work. We've got to create jobs and get the economy rolling again. And to date, we've got our goal really with our plan is we've got to get economic levels back so that they were where we were before this pandemic. And right now there's about 150,000 people that are out of work that were working last year at this time. So that removing the PST for 1 year and then cutting it to 3% for 2 years until the pandemic is over is the kind of bold action that is essential to BC's economic recovery. And BC, the PST has been noted by economics, that word, but as a very regressive tax, and we think it's going to save people money. Now, the impact on business here in the Columbia Valley is going to be remarkable, really, when you think about it. In the tourism sector alone, PST amounts for about $1.8 billion a year. And that $1.8 billion a year is going to be circulated back into the economy, back into keeping businesses open and so on. When it comes to the impact on housing, and of course it affects affordable housing, PST will cut approximately $9 per square foot. So on a modest home of 1,000 square feet, that's about a $9,000 saving that's in people's pockets. So I think it's really good for the Columbia River Revelstoke. It's going to promote local shopping because there is no PST, and of course our friends from Alberta always seem to bring some of their stuff with them. So hopefully that'll create a little bit more revenue for our local businesses. So we're really excited by it. It's a bold move, and I think it's going to work really well.
Thank you. Candidate Boyer, describe the Green Party's basic income plan. Who would qualify? Will it be replacing any existing provincial social assistance programs, and how much will it cost?
Thank you for the question. I grew up most of my life with my parents making less than $40,000 a year some. I grew up feeling the stress of poverty, and I know that I'm not alone. There are a lot of young people who grew up in homes like that, and there are a lot of parents who are fighting about how they're going to be able to pay the bills in the next couple months, especially due to COVID now. That's why I'm so excited about a basic income program. So first, who would it apply to? It would apply to foster care children. Youth who are coming out of foster care, who didn't have the advantages I did growing up with two loving parents. It would be $20,000 annually, which would not be clawed back in taxes so that they could build a future for themselves. The cost? It would cost roughly, and this might change, of course, $57 million just for the foster care, the youth coming out of foster care. That sounds like a lot, but in the provincial budget, it's a drop in the bucket. And what's even more incredible is it might actually save the government anywhere between $20 to $150 million annually. Because when people don't live in poverty, they can go out and be a participant. They can volunteer in their community. Their life expectancy is better. They have better health outcomes. Police and crime will decrease, and people facing addiction can afford the treatment they need. And no, it would not replace, at least not in the early stages, any form of disability. In fact, the BC Greens want to make permanent 300 added to this bill.
Thank you. For the second round of policy questions, we're going to begin with candidate Klochuk. Describe the proposed investments in the Rebuild BC infrastructure program.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. And again, the BC Infrastructure Transportation Program, it's a bold look at what needs to be done to stimulate the economy and get people back working. What we're going to offer is an additional $8 billion in infrastructure improvements over 3 years. And the reason for that is that we need to create jobs and again stimulate the economy. This is something that is not new, and it's been done in the post-World War II Canadian economy. It was done right after the Depression in the United States under President Roosevelt's New Deal. So it's tried and it's tested. So we're going to have a total of about $31 billion over the next 3 years to talk about transportation and deal with transportation, to build hospitals. We're good at building things. Senior care home and affordable housing, just to mention a few. One of the things that I would like to say is that we're going to fast track the Trans-Canada Highway. We're going to do our best to get that project working. It's been 3.5 years and there's not a whole lot going on. And we need a long-term solution for Three Valley Gap is another example, just west of Revelstoke, and get some access to the Lower Kicking Horse Canyon. And I hear that all the time from folks. And rural transportation issues, medical services between Cranbrook and Kelowna are a big one. I worked really hard through the Solicitor General's office to secure the RCMP traffic service members for when the highway is rerouted through Radium, so that our general duty officers and members aren't being pulled into service in that sense. We're also going to upgrade the rest areas in BC. We're going to have increased traffic. We're already seeing increased traffic from Canadians because the American population and European travelers aren't here. And we're going to upgrade within the program emergency rooms and K-12 facilities. So it's bold, it's exciting, and for our riding, it's going to provide a lot of needed road improvements. And hopefully we're going to get this Kicking Horse Canyon underway before it's too late.
Thank you. Candidate Boyer, the Green Party platform calls for BC to be carbon neutral by 2045. Describe how this will be accomplished. Samson, we can't hear you.
We are facing a climate emergency, and it scares the living heck out of me. The next generation is far worse. We are going to see an increase in natural disasters. We're going to see more hurricanes, more forest fires, and to face this crisis, we have to act now. The BC Green Party, I believe, has the best policies to combat climate change and get us carbon neutral by 2045. How we're going to get that done is we're going to invest in all sectors, from agriculture to construction to innovation and tech. The BC Green Party wants to transfer all public transit to electric vehicles by 2025, which will include rural communities so that we can get to our jobs without having to spend so much money on gas every week. We're also committed to protecting our carbon sinks and the natural habitat of species at risk. More than anything, we're willing to invest in green, renewable jobs. Over $500 million in the first, once the first Parliament opens, will be pushed through, hopefully, in a coalition with the BC NDP and Liberals, if they support us, to ensure that we don't have to rely on liquid natural gas, and the energy sector can move to renewable clean energy across the province. The fact that we're still buying coal power from the States is detestable to me. So invest in sustainable jobs, transition transportation.
Thank you. Candidate Charlet. The NDP platform aims for better learning for BC children and youth. What are your proposed changes?
So I think we can all agree kids are our future, and we want to make sure that they have every opportunity that they can, no matter where they grow up and who their family is. Like Samuelson was mentioning, we don't all have the privilege of two loving parents with high-paying jobs. So, I mean, in the past, the BC Liberals have given tax breaks to the wealthy before, and they cut education for a whole generation. They fought in court to raise class sizes. They refused to build more schools in too many growing communities. They made parents fundraise for playgrounds, where kids are still recovering from that 16 years of Liberal cuts, and we can't afford to do this anymore. So when John Horgan canceled some of the tax breaks to the wealthiest and invested more in our kids, they hired 4,200 new teachers. We have the smallest class sizes in a decade. They've been improving school projects twice as fast as the BC Liberals, and have invested a record $2 billion over the 3 years we've had in new schools, expansions, upgrades, 13,000 new spaces. Now, through this pandemic, we need to make sure we keep the kids safe by listening to the guidelines of the public health officials. So we're looking at new ventilation systems, plexiglass barriers in the key areas, comprehensive cleaning stations, more cleaning in those schools. We need to fast track the improvements to online and remote learning. This is where that connectivity becomes so critical that we invest in. That's where we need to be investing our money. Infrastructure, yes, that's important, but I mean, our kids' future, this is what we need to see so that they have the opportunities they deserve, and they can help us build the economy of the future to tackle those climate action challenges.
Thank you. We move to the third round of policy questions, beginning with candidate Boyer. What steps will the Green Party take to address rental affordability?
The housing crisis has been a problem for decades now, and it seems to only be getting worse. Half a million is not affordable, especially for young people and old people who are just entering or leaving the economy. I know for a fact I won't be able to afford a house for decades and will have to keep renting. The BC Green Party has a few policies that will immediately address this problem, including a rent subsidy, which covers 30% of low and middle income families and individuals' rent. And in the long term, we'll continue to work with the other parties to implement the 100,000 new affordable units that the BC government is building right now. If elected MLA, in our region. It's important that we work with local developers and with communities to ensure that any new developments have and include affordable housing. As for something just a little, as a student, it's incredibly hard for me to find rent in new towns that I'm going to. At the same time, we have been underserving our seniors for far too long. An interesting policy proposal I'd love to present is working with universities and colleges to present dual housing, where students can go live with seniors and support them while having a place to stay at school. So yeah, thank you. There's a lot that we can do, and there's a lot that we have been doing. We just need to do more.
Thank you. Candidate Charlet, how will the NDP clean energy economy proposal address the accelerating climate crisis and at the same time support a strong economy?
I mean, we've already seen the impacts of climate change in Columbia River Revelstoke. We owe it to our future generations to really do our part. So that's why the BC NDP works so closely with Dr. Andrew Weaver to develop Clean BC, that ambitious climate plan. This is where we have this economic opportunity to build back better so we can tackle these climate change challenges while we create good jobs. There's a lot of different pieces to this, and most of it ties back to committing BC to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Right now, currently, there's a target of reducing emissions by 40% by 2030, and we're going to pass legislation requiring BC to reach net zero by 2050. This means there's either no harmful carbon emissions or they are offset by natural carbon sinks, carbon capture, or other technologies. We're going to require greener buildings. We're already requiring new buildings and retrofits to be more energy efficient and cleaner. So every new building constructed in BC must be net zero ready by 2032. This helps on the affordable housing side as well, in that it reduces the cost to operate a property. I'm not looking forward to my heating bill for this year. You may have noticed me blowing on my hands. We've got to put the plastic up in our rental here. And this is partly in part with empowering local governments to set their own carbon pollution performance standards for new buildings. We're going to be accelerating energy efficient retrofits beginning now, as soon as we can get in there. We're going to expand the Clean BC and our zero emissions vehicle program to include industrial vehicles. We're going to ramp up the industrial emissions strategy and fast track our industrial electrification strategy. This is how we work with our colleagues on different levels of government and BC Hydro to really make sure we can make it easier to go green.
Thank you. And candidate Klobuchar, describe how the BC Liberals will support BC seniors and what investments will you make on their behalf?
Well, thank you, Dean. And this is obviously a question that hits close to home for all of us, whether you have grandparents or parents in care facilities and in care as we speak. Our plan is robust. We're going to make sure that seniors, and COVID-19 has really kind of highlighted how bad this has been throughout this country and obviously in our province of British Columbia. Our plan is going to see new care supports for seniors that will improve their health and safety. And I think what's really key to this is underscoring the quality of their life. From a money perspective, we're going to invest $1 billion over 5 years, and those new investments will look like at infrastructure and facility upgrades, which we've discovered are drastically needed. And one of the things that we found from seniors is that there's so many that want to have a single room, and they should have one. So we're going to invest in those infrastructures. The thing that I've been working on as the MLA here with so many families and one specifically in Revelstoke is that we've got to find a way to enable family members to visit their loved ones in long care and assisted and independent living. One of the women that I was dealing with in Revelstoke has a 93-year-old father. They get to see him once a week, and he lost his wife during COVID-19, not from COVID-19, but he told his wife that, you know what, or his daughter, you know, I should just die, because you couldn't bring in ethnic food, you couldn't go visits. We've got to find ways to make seniors feel more comfortable where they live. And one of the big things that I'm hearing is that the Better at Home program, we're going to offer $7,000 a year, up to $20,000 housekeeping, home repairs, and supportive home care visits, and address the chronic shortage of workers. When I was at the college, we trained lots of healthcare assistants. So there is a ton of work to do. Samson, I really like your idea of dual housing. I hear that from seniors that are looking for potential someone to come and live and you know, offset some of their things. So I think that's a great idea. And yeah, lots of things to do.
Thank you, candidate Klobuchar. We're now moving into the open debate portion of the first part of the forum. Each candidate will have 1 minute to compare and contrast their policies against the policies of their rivals. We'll begin with candidate Charlet.
Great. So when we're talking about comparing and contrasting, I got to do a quick shout out. I appreciate hearing such progressive policies coming out of the BC Liberals. I think they're starting to recognize that after so many years of not investing in the social values that keep our fabric together, that maybe this was a bad idea. All these shortfalls in childcare, in housing, and in seniors care happened under the watch of the BC Liberals. And in past elections, Doug, I remember hearing you talk about how it was important to have a seat at the table, be part of government, to be part of those policy discussions so that the rural voice gets heard. It's critical to have wide diversity of perspectives when you're discussing these policies so that we make sure that we uphold our values, not just the economic bottom line, but those social values and the environmental values that we find so important here in Columbia River Revelstoke.
Candidate Klobuchar.
Well, thank you for that, Nicole, and thank you for recognizing how progressive we actually are, because we truly are. And when you talk about seat at a table, you know, I've been in the legislature now for the last 3.5 years, and I've sat at a lot of tables, including the one that the former premier sat at as well. And the way that you get things done in the legislature is that you don't necessarily just go to a caucus meeting and have a discussion. You go there and you meet the ministers of the Crown, because they're not ministers of the NDP. And I've been able to accomplish that by building relationships with those ministers, even though they're on opposite sides of the House and the floor. So whether it was Katrine Conroy on the Columbia River Treaty issues, or forestry issues with Doug Donaldson, or with the Premier himself on Three Valley Gap, I've been able to achieve that. So as far as our policy goes, I think we've got a very robust plan, and it was developed and based on people, and we're really looking forward to implementing it as the next government.
Candidate Boyer.
It warms my heart to no end to see that across all party lines, we're talking about climate change as a serious issue, and that each party has policies that directly affect it and are working to make life better for Canadians and fight climate change. That being said, I am incredibly proud of the work that the BC Greens and BC NDP have been able to do. It makes me tear up a little to hear that we couldn't keep doing that work. But I think that if we're going to move forward, we need to elect politicians that will take a real stand on climate change. Site C and the Northern LNG projects are billions of dollars over budget and have been approved by both the Liberals and NDP. We need to end oil and gas subsidies, and I don't hear any other candidates talking about that. Thank you.
Candidate Charlet.
So just to put a little bit of a caveat on my last comment, when I was grateful for the policies coming forward from the BC Liberals, I don't know that I would go so far as to call the party itself progressive. Some of the comments we've been seeing coming out of down in the Lower Mainland horrify me. The mention of conversion therapy and talking about eugenics when it comes to birth control, there's some cleanup that needs to happen there, and I think we're all pretty confident that Andrew Wilkinson is probably not going to form the next government. John Horgan's just done such a great job. That collaborative attitude, that was part of that tone change that we saw in the past elections. That's what happens when you get fresh new voices into government. When you start listening to the experts and listening to local residents, governments, First Nations, that's how you make things happen and get really creative. If we're going to make bold decisions going forward through this, that's what we need at the table.
Candidate Klobuchar.
Yeah, thank you very much. Around healthcare in our province of British Columbia, we do have an outstanding system. I know that firsthand. But I'd like to ask Nicole, and I'm going to say Nicole, ask Nicole a question, is that rural healthcare is critical. It's completely different than urban healthcare, and yet it's painted with one brush. I'd like to know what your position and how you're going to handle, and what will you do to promote transborder healthcare between Alberta and BC.
Candidate Charlet.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. This is something that I find when I go to Vancouver and when I participate in conventions, that people in the Lower Mainland and the rest of the communities, it's really easy, or it has been really easy, to just fly from one city to the next and forget that those little squiggly lines on the map are actually quite a bit larger than they look. So getting somebody at the table that is comfortable and familiar with driving those highways on a regular basis, right there starts changing some of the mindset. The opportunities through the pandemic, building in that remote opportunity, the telehealth that used to be said we can't do. Now we can see opportunities for how do we connect in different ways so that we're not traveling those highways nearly as much. I hope I get the chance to fight for that as the new MLA, because I also love to listen, hear, and represent my constituents just as much as you.
Candidate Boyer.
You're on mute again there.
We can't hear you, Samson.
I'll pick up that question from you too, if that's okay, Doug. One thing that isn't talked very much when it comes to rural healthcare is the paramedics. When our residents need emergency service and need to be brought to a hospital immediately, we rely on our paramedics and ambulance services. And what's been going on for years now is the continued underfunding and undervaluing of our rural paramedics. In most cases, they are now just starting to make a minimum wage. And even that wouldn't be near enough to honor the people who are literally saving our lives. It's something I would love to see any of our candidates bring up to the provincial legislature. And I hope that we can properly support rural healthcare. Thank you.
Candidate Klobuchar.
I have another question for Nicole. One of the things around the COVID-19 that we saw in the reopening of schools, which was obviously so important, but we heard from the BC Teachers Federation. I've heard personally from teachers in Columbia River Revelstoke, from Revelstoke all the way to Kimberley, that they felt that they've been very much ignored by this government or the past government under John Horgan in terms of the decisions that were made about the reopening, that they didn't believe that their voices had been heard and they don't feel safe. So my question to you, Nicole, would be, what do you think your government could have done differently to make this transition easier for teachers?
Well, I think it's hard to look back on the decisions we made in the spring and the fall, summer and the fall, and say how we could have done them differently. Because most of us would look back, well, if only I would known this. But we're still yet in the fog of war with this pandemic. We don't know what it's going to bring. What I do hear from people is that when we have these policies, these protocols in place, we're starting to understand how this virus moves. And the more confident we get with those basic protocols, the easier it is going to be to handle this second wave and stay safe. Now, Dr. Bonnie Henry and John Horgan's government were speaking with various different stakeholders. Now, obviously, not everyone can be at the table, and those communication lines can definitely be improved, where we can keep everybody in the loop as best we can. But I don't know about you, but for me, it was overwhelming, the amount of information coming at me, and trying to stay straight with it all is a challenge for all of us. But I know there's a willingness to listen.
Candidate Boyer.
Yes, along these same veins, I question how much the BC NDP have been listening to professionals in and around COVID. I agree, Nicole, that none of us can predict the future, but I think we can all accept that holding an election during a pandemic is not the safest thing for British Columbians and isn't looking out for our best interests. We had another year before an election was supposed to be called, and other than looking for a majority, looking for power, I don't see why we're forcing voters to go to the polls. But I would like to thank the people of BC elections. They've done an incredible job, and it's fantastic to see so many British Columbians.
Okay, this will be the last series of comments from the candidates during this open forum, starting with candidate Charlet, please.
Sorry, that was me?
We're still part of the debate, the open debate. So just your last point or concluding remark.
Perfect. Thank you. We've talked about a few different topics tonight, and one of the things that really hits home for me is looking out for our workers, the workers in our businesses, the workers in healthcare, the workers in our education systems, because for too long they have been undervalued, and it's getting to the point where they can't afford to buy a new home. So yeah, great, we're going to save a bit of PST on the construction of a new home, but when we're talking about the average incomes of these workers, they're just hoping to find a rental they can still afford and maybe buy into a home that now these prices have skyrocketed beyond their reach, where they can't afford that, whether it's a down payment, but also qualifying for that mortgage. I wonder, Doug, how do you think this is really going to make a big difference when we're talking about affordable housing and making sure there's room for all of us to live in our communities?
Candidate Klobuchar.
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity, Nicole. I think when you look at the PST and building a new home, what we've got to try to do, if you want to have more product, and one of the problems with affordable housing right now in Revelstoke, you live there and you know how dire it is. But that's not only in Revelstoke, it's in Kimberley, it's in Golden, and obviously it's in Riviera throughout the Columbia Valley. We've got to put more supply available, and how are you going to do that? So you can't do it through the government because you can't tax your way into prosperity. That's just not possible. So you've got to find ways to get investors to actually start to look at building affordable homes. You know, whether it's a single family dwelling or if it's multiple unit dwellings. By eliminating the PST, you're actually saving money, so things can go into childcare. So a developer, for example, at Revelstoke Mountain Resort, was saving that kind of money off of the build, and they could put a childcare in the new build for their employees. So there's lots of upsides in trying to stimulate the economy rather than trying to tax your way out of a pandemic.
Candidate Boyer.
People of Columbia River Revelstoke face a number of crises and will probably only face more. I can remember just 2 months ago when the sky was not even visible, and at night it turned orange because of all the smoke in the air. We are facing an opioid epidemic, we're facing a climate crisis, and we're facing a housing struggle. It's a lot to deal with, and I believe that it's important that we work together moving forwards. I've been incredibly impressed by the work of this government, and I just hope that we can keep working forwards to solve the problems that face the people in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving on to the second portion of the forum. Each of the candidates will have an opportunity to answer the question, followed by a 5-minute open debate session. The first question goes to candidate Klobuchar. Housing affordability is a huge issue. The problem is that it is so difficult to get new supply, which leads to higher home costs and rents. The recent Development Approval Process Review report identifies several ways for provincial and local governments to streamline the approval process. Will you commit to adopting these measures to accelerate development?
Well, thank you for that question, Dean. And you know, you hit the nail right on the head. If you're going to have more affordable housing opportunities, you have to work closely with local governments, and it's critical that they address that process. Local government has to be involved in this, and they have been. We're going to be looking at, again, from an investment perspective, about a $1.7 billion housing plan over the next 3 years. And BC's population is growing about 60,000 people every year. And of course, that creates multiple issues. And one size doesn't fit all, which is difficult when you think about it, because legislation is usually passed with everybody in mind. But so many, whether you're in Revelstoke or Kimberley or wherever you are, your housing needs are unique in many ways. So we've got to look at that as well. We're going to work with municipalities on current tax structures and review with them their OCPs. How can we be helping you achieve your goals inside those OCPs? And we need to protect rental properties from redevelopment. We've got to support zoning and cut red tape for people who are building things. Lessen the time it's going to take to get permits. And I think one of the key issues here is around land use. Is that one of the big struggles is there's a huge competition for land. We've got to open up new municipal lands and give the municipalities the opportunity to do that, and also for crown lands, so that those lands can be utilized for building new homes and reduce the competition for that land. So there's lots of things to do, and again, the PST is going to help that. Is that by cutting those PST costs for builders, or for new home owners, or someone who's going to be investing in a rental property to rent it to somebody. That way they can get into the market and they can provide those kinds of things as well. So that PST cut $9,000 on a 1,000 square foot home, that's a $9,000 bill. That's significant money. That's real money. That's today's money that can be utilized. And we're very proud to say that the feedback we're getting on that is really positive.
Thank you. Candidate Boyer.
For the question. Yes, no, improving and increasing the speed of development and improving the speed of government approvals for government projects and housing is incredibly important. I was on the board of governors at Selkirk College, and for years we had applied for new housing units so we can have students instead of having them go into the community and eat up rental space. And it took us years, and even when we got approval, it was not nearly enough. Approval is something we need to push through, but it's also needs to come with the resources to back it up. Supporting our forestry industry by a lumber first project across BC that's been done by the BC Greens and NDP is a great start to making construction more affordable for developers and locals. Doug's completely right. We need to work with local municipalities in developing land usage plans and ensure that we can support the communities so that they can support themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Charlet.
This is the part that I get excited about, because so much of the issues we've been facing are because of this legacy of patchwork policy, where it really depended on who you knew or who was in power in your particular area. And we need to have a simplified process to really improve the efficiency of development approvals and just the way we look at development in general. So continuing to do this work, the BC's Economic Recovery Plan through the NDP is including $15 million for development services. So we can continue to work on that, the work identified through that development approvals process review, so that we can support innovative local government efforts to make this whole process smoother. For years, when the housing-related revenues were soaring, BC Liberal government investments in affordable public housing fell short. The resulting lack of affordable housing has hurt people, communities, and our economy. We're starting to turn that around with more than 25,000 affordable homes, including quite a few here, right here in Revelstoke and in our riding. But there's still so much work to do. So at stake in this election, we have a 10-year housing plan and 114,000 new affordable homes that are going to bring housing to tens of thousands of British Columbians. We're going to continue rolling out our Homes for BC plan, which is the largest investment in affordable housing in our province's history. We're also going to reduce construction costs to make those new homes more affordable. By bringing down costs for developers, we can, through streamlining and modernizing housing construction, developing a single window provincial permitting process, and working with communities and local governments to streamline approval processes at their local level as well.
Thank you. We'll begin the open debate portion on housing with candidate Boyer.
Affordability is a big problem for a lot of young people, and especially for young students who are just graduating. I grew up and I love the Kootenays, and I want the chance to raise a family out here. But currently there is no feasible way I could afford a home. That's why I think it's important that we work together. The BC Green and BC NDP housing program, which is developing 100,000 units across BC, is because the BC Green Party was there supporting the NDP. For all the good that we've done together, I think we can do so much more moving into the future. Thank you.
Candidate Charlet.
So I'm calling you from my home in Revelstoke. It was great to get back and be able to sleep in my own bed tonight. I'm looking forward to it. But I would like to point out, I am still renting. I am a tenant in this market. I tried to find a new rental this spring, and every place that we looked at had 30 inquiries within 24 hours. That is a weird situation to be in. I talked to a tourism worker when I was in Golden, and she was excited about this new job she'd found working remotely, earning $40,000 a year, but she still can't qualify for a mortgage, right? We need to have that pathway to home ownership that does not include an old mobile trailer on a rental pad for $185,000. This is an outrageous ask. And when I'm talking to people on my council and in Provincial, everywhere else that I'm talking to, and the lack of perspective is mind-boggling, because when you bought your home, I bet you it was under 100,000. And I bet you it wasn't that hard to qualify for a mortgage compared to what it is now. So having that personal perspective makes me ask different questions. And if we're going to tackle this housing challenge, we need to get creative. So it's not just about knowing how things used to work. It's about asking the right questions so we can get creative on how things will work as we rebuild our economy.
Thank you. Andrea, 1 minute responses and 15-second timer for the open debate, please. Candidate Klobuchar.
Well, thank you very much. It's a couple of questions for Nicole. The rents and real estate prices have skyrocketed in the last 3 years, like nowhere else, and there's higher property taxes for folks as well. But I would like to know from Nicole, number one, what happened to the $400 renter rebate that Mr. Horgan promised in 2017? Why didn't that happen? And how many actually units of the 114,000 that were promised in 2017, how many has he actually delivered?
Candidate Charlet.
Well, Doug, you'd probably know better than I do what happened to that $400 rental rebate being in government. I'm sitting here in Revelstoke, sitting on city council, trying to run my small business and just dealing with the affordability challenges from this end. I've been sitting in poverty reduction working groups, listening to the collaboration between social service providers and how excited they are about the investments over the last 3 years, where they're finally starting to be able to make some progress because the policies are getting opened up, where they have the supports they need, or at least the beginnings of them. Like I said before, there is still so much to do going forward so that we can continue to make progress and make life more affordable for our staff, for our customers, so that they have more money to spend without having to get a tax rebate that would benefit the big spenders a lot more than it benefits the actual average family in Columbia River Revelstoke.
Candidate Boyer.
To answer your question, Doug, the BC Greens and BC NDP have constructed, I believe it's over 20,000 units, but I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, which for a 10-year plan is not a bad start. And it's not an unsubstantial number. Units is 20,000 families that now have a roof over their head. I would like to diverge this topic over to the affordability crisis and how it affects our homeless people and how it affects the people who are the most disenfranchised. As both candidates know, the Liberals are saying that they're going to hire 2,000 new police officers to deal with the homeless problem in Victoria, Vancouver. And under the NDP's watch, we have seen tent cities continue and the opioid crisis worsen. I'd love to hear their thoughts.
Candidate Klobuchar, the last word is yours.
Well, I am going to put a correction in for Sampson. In actuality, Mr. Horgan, under that 114,000 unit, has only produced less than 3,500 units. So it's a little different than 20,000. But as far as the opioid crisis goes, I think it's incredibly important that we look at that. And our platform is very clear about that. There's multiple issues associated with opioid use and mental health. And we've got to look and treat each individual as an individual. And we've got to look at where the causes of that crisis are before we can look at harm reduction. And when Samson's talking about hiring police officers, that is for protection. That's also to go after the bad guys that are taking advantage of this very, very vulnerable community, and so on. And so around mental health, we're also going to be looking at hiring more psychiatric nurses that can actually go out in the field with police officers and work with those communities. It should be a nonpartisan problem, and I'm looking forward to tackling it.
Thank you. We now move on to a question that the candidates have not received in advance, and we'll begin with candidate Charlet. The question is, small businesses have taken a huge hit this year with the immense impacts of COVID-19. Outline your plan to help small business.
Yeah, my small business was one of the ones hit. I really appreciate what Dr. Bonnie Henry has said in this, is that we might all be in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. Every small business has a slightly different set of variables that they're fighting, and they're trying to get through and be innovative. But this is what I love about working with small business owners. That's why I was involved with the Chamber of Commerce for so many years before I got elected to City Council. Because it's with working with our peers and working with our networks that we can get innovative to come up with solutions of how to tackle these challenges and serve our customers, because that's what we do. We exchange value for revenue, and that's how we keep on ticking. We create jobs by giving value-added jobs to our people. Now, sorry, for the BC NDP, we have dropped that small business tax rate down to 2%, and that's for businesses that have under $500,000 in net profits to make it a little bit more affordable for them to continue doing business.
Thank you. Candidate Klobuchar. Small businesses have taken a huge hit this year with the immense impact of COVID-19. Outline your plan to help small businesses.
No question about it, Dean, that small businesses have taken it on the chin on this one as well. And what I keep hearing from small business throughout the riding, whether it be from Kimberley to Revelstoke, is there is a money issue, there's a money cash flow issue, fluidity issue. And what we've done is that the PST is going to help small business as well. As I said, in the tourism industry, it's about a $1.8 billion savings that will generate back to those owners. But we've also eliminated the 2% small business tax. That elimination, those monies go right back into the business's pocket, and they can keep their doors open. It's less taxes, more money for them, and even keep their employees working. So we are very alive to the fact that small business runs this province. I think it's around 80% of all businesses are small business. I was a small business owner myself. I realize how difficult and how those margins work. So we've got some robust programs in place, and again, we're hearing from businesses that they're very, very excited about it.
Thank you. Candidate Boyer. Small businesses have taken a huge hit this year with the immense impact of COVID-19. Outline your plan to help small businesses.
It's been a tough go of it for a lot of people. And the BC Green Party is committed to supporting small because they're the lifeblood of our communities. And so with that, we're supporting a rent subsidy for all small businesses so that they can keep their front doors open during this pandemic. More than that, I think that we need to support the creation of future small businesses. And that's why I think the basic income is such an interesting and useful point of legislation. Because once you remove people's anxiety of trying to feed their families or affording the rent, they're able to spend their time to go and build their own business, build a foundation in the future for their children. So we should support our businesses we have today and work on creating new ones in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to the open debate portion on support for small business in a COVID economy, and we begin with candidate Klobuchar.
I have just a quick question for Nicole. The BC NDP have, since they've become a minority, and it didn't win the last election, obviously, but they've implemented 23 new taxes, and one of those taxes, of course, is the health tax, which was just a shift of money from the MSP to the back to small businesses. So I would just be very interested in your take on how these 23 new taxes can possibly help small business.
Well, when the NDP first formed government, they also cut the small business tax rate, and is now the second lowest in the country. You're talking about eliminating it, and you're talking about eliminating the PST, but what services are you going to cut to be able to compensate for that? We already eliminated the PST on electricity for businesses to reduce their monthly cost. We created, when we're talking about small business, a big part of the issue that we have is staffing and making sure that we have staff to be able to reopen our doors. Those clear protocols to have safety, that's how we're going to be able to continue to open our doors for the traffic that's actually still coming. There's a big of a challenge. There's still a bit of a challenge depending on where you get your clientele from. But the businesses I've been talking to, numbers are picking up again. We just need to get innovative and have the staff to be able to perform our job and do that service for our customers.
Candidate Boyer.
Thank you. And agree with Nicole that ensuring that we have the staff to keep our businesses open is incredibly important. Doug, yes, there have been tax increases, but that's a part of ensuring that we have a social safety net to keep people from falling into the depths of poverty. I guess I have a question to both candidates. The BC Green Party have a plan to invest in small businesses and affordable rental renovations to transition us to net zero by 2045. What are the party's policy, the other two parties' plans to get us to net zero from the perspective of small businesses?
Candidate Klobuchar.
Well, I'd just like to respond to that from a personal perspective, to be quite honest with you, is that we are very alive on the environmental issue and on the carbon. You have to remember that the BC Liberals were the party that brought the carbon tax in, and were recognized internationally for doing that. So one of the things that we want to do is to reestablish BC as a climate leader. And we were recognized, as I said, as that climate leader. That, quite frankly, that's fallen short. But from a personal perspective, and I mentioned this the other night, is that my office, my constituency office in Kimberley is net zero. It took us 2 years to get there. We're completely running off of solar, and I worked with my landlord to do that. So I think it's really important. And the reason I mention that is that if each of us as individuals start to do something, and as a political leader, I decided that I needed to do something, and Kimberley was a great place to do that. It's incredibly innovative there, and it's young and it's vibrant. So we worked with our landlord, and we are completely off the grid. It's all solar, and we're really proud. My constituency assistant froze for a while, but it's working now, and we're really pleased about that.
Candidate Boyer, the last word goes to you.
Well, thank you for answering, Doug. I would just like to say that, yeah, it's great when individuals take action on climate change, and we should, as individuals, work towards making life better and solving climate change, but it's not nearly enough. I've recycled for most of my life, as have most people I know, and that was an individual action. And yet we found out this year that recycling was a scam by big oil corporations. We need more than just individual action. We need the government to actually work for the people and prevent the disaster that we're facing. We need to end the oil and gas subsidies that both the NDP and the Liberals have supported and voted for and continue to do. Now more than ever, we need candidates that care about the future. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question that the candidates did not receive in advance, the first answer goes to candidate Boyer. You have 2 minutes. If elected, what actions will your government take on the cost of childcare? What supports will you provide for young families? Will you support early childhood education for children aged 3 to 4?
That's a very important question because childcare has been getting increasingly unaffordable. The BC Greens have helped and supported the NDP in the $10 a day childcare. And I, if elected, would want to ensure that we can get $10 a day childcare across this province. The BC Greens are also committed to early childhood education and ensuring that parents have the money to take care of their kids. We're offering a subsidy to parents who have been facing the brunt of taking care of their children during COVID. More than anything, I believe we need to come back to our communities. We've lost that community network that we once had where grandma or the neighbors could watch the kids while mom and dad were at work. We need to offer the supports and ensure that the systems are in place on the local level that can make sure that we have and raise the next generation healthily and happily. And a big part of that is making sure they have a future as well. Thank you.
Candidate Charlet, if elected, what actions will your government take on the cost of childcare? What supports will you provide for young families? Will you support early childhood education for children aged 3 to 4?
So affordable childcare has a big impact. It means we're not asking parents to make those impossible choices. Like, do I go to work or do I stay home? I lost one of my core staff, one of my core employees this summer to that very question because it was just too much for her to be able to handle. The BC Liberals gave tax breaks to the richest for years while doing nothing for families that were struggling with childcare. They ignored the needs of BC families and BC businesses because childcare is an economic policy. We created more childcare spaces in our first 10 months than the BC Liberals created in 4 years. We're creating those spaces at the fastest pace in the province's history, and we are on track to meet our goals. It is a 10-year plan. We are getting through that first 3 years of it. We've funded 20,000 new childcare spaces. More than 32,000 families in BC are now receiving childcare for $10 a day or less, and they're saving up to $1,600 per month. This is where we're going to accelerate our plan to bring that $10 a day childcare to all BC families by increasing benefits, building new childcare spaces, and continuing to provide that universal access to before and after school care on school grounds. We'll be working with the teachers and the education system to make this happen, and I'm excited to see that progress continue.
Did we lose you?
Sorry, I pulled Samson. Candidate Klobuchar, if elected, what actions will your government take on the cost of childcare? What supports will you provide for young families? Will you support early childhood education for children aged 3 to 4?
Well, thank you very much for that, Dean. And I think it's a little rich when Nicole says what they've accomplished. They've actually accomplished 2% of what they've actually promised, and that's not fake news. That's the real news. But more importantly, what the BC Liberals are going to plan to do is we're going to offer a scaled process, and we're investing millions of dollars into this. Is that there's going to be a $10 a day childcare, $20 a day childcare, and a $30 a day childcare that's stepped up on your wages, so $65,000. 90,000 and up to 125,000. We're going to provide affordable childcare for people who need it, especially those with lower income. And we're also going to look at creating, you can create as many spaces as you want, as many of those spaces as you want. Without your early child care educators, there's nobody in those spaces. So we are going to focus on creating new training opportunities, working with colleges and universities to train these people, make sure that they're well trained, and also make sure that they're well paid. So we're going to be looking at that. We're so committed to this. We're going to create a standalone ministry of childcare, so that that minister will be able to focus their attention specifically on this issue, because it's such a critical issue for moms and dads and grandparents, for that matter, who also have to deal with kids and looking after them as well. So we've got a robust plan that we're going to do that. We need to get people back to work. So in order to get them back to work, we've got to get them the childcare that they need. Also, in terms of investing in our province, we've got we've got doctor shortages here. And one of the first questions that a doctor asks, or a lawyer, whoever you are as a professional, do you have good childcare? If we don't have that childcare, we're going to lose those professionals. They'll go somewhere else. So yes, we do. We have a very robust, and yes, we will support childcare without question, without any cuts to anything else.
The open debate portion, each of you have 1 minute to talk about childcare. And I didn't hear any of you address whether you would support early childhood education for children aged 3 to 4. So could you please start with that? Candidate Charlet.
And I wish I had that in front of me, but I do remember seeing something along the idea of tying early childhood education in with the education system. As I'm traveling the communities, I'm seeing these childcare centers attached to school systems. And a big part, I agree, it has to do with the staff that work these childcare spaces. So that's why we've expanded not just the program spaces, but also bursary funding for those who want to pursue a career in childcare as an ECE or early childhood educator, dealing with those shortages that were left behind by the BC Liberals. We've also done a wage top-up. I remember hearing about it when I sat down as a city councillor with the local school board to find out how they were putting these systems in place so that as we drive down the cost for families, we keep those wages up so that it's a desirable career choice and that those childhood educators aren't themselves going into affordability crises.
Thank you. Candidate Klobuchar, do you support early childhood education for ages 3 to 4?
Well, I actually, Dean, I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think I did answer that question. Early childcare is ageless, and when you think about our proposal for whether it be a $10 a day care process, if that's your salary up to $65,000, or $20 a day up to $95,000, or $30 a day up to $125,000. That's going to affect all families, no matter what their ages are, so that they can get their kids into a child care facility so that they can go to work and make a decent living and feel very comfortable and assured that their kids are well taken care of. And that goes along with after school programs or preschool programs. So the answer to that question is that we've committed to doing all of those things. And I think it's really important to understand is that we're serious to commit an actual ministry to this. It's been long overdue. There's no question about it. And we're going to commit the time, the energy, and the dollars and the expertise to make this thing happen.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. I should have been more clear. The Green Party is offering $400 to parents and families who have children from the age of 3 to 4 to support their education or get help, to be able to afford help. Touching on Nicole's idea, I think the work that's been done by the BC Green Party, pushing for care at institutions like universities and colleges, has been able to open up people to receive an education to get their nursing degree, to become a doctor, or to enter the economy. And I think that's something we need to push more for and invest in. Seeing this at the business level would be great as well. And that's specifically for children from 3 to 4.
Candidate Charlet.
So one of the things, Mr. Klobuchar, that you mentioned was the pace that we're on. And I always get interested by statistics. because numbers matter about how you define that number. And I'm curious as to how you're defining that, because the universal $10 a day childcare is a 10-year plan. We understand that parents need that extra support. So now more than ever, we're committing to an additional $1.5 billion over 3 years to create those spaces even quicker and pick up that pace. Now that we have the buy-in from the BC Liberals, the understanding that this is a critical investment for our economy, I'm hoping we'll be able to get that moving along faster.
Candidate Klobuchar.
Yeah, well, thank you. Statistics and mathematics don't lie. Basically, the NDP promised 24,000 spaces, and they delivered 3,500, and that's the facts. I mean, you can bend that any way you want, but at the end of the day, they haven't delivered on what they said. As a matter of fact, and using Ms. Charlet's own words, at the pace that they're going, it's a good thing that they are going to speed it up. Because it would take about 100 years for them to reach their goal the way that they're doing right now. People will be graduated and married and have children before that happens. So what we're doing again is we're going to be providing a staged presence around daycare and childcare, $10 a day, $20 a day, $30 a day, so that everybody that needs daycare and childcare can find it and get it and accessible and have it for their families. And that's what we're going to do, and we're real proud of that.
Look, I'd like to touch on something you said earlier. You said your party would increase funding and support for education without increasing taxes. Are you suggesting that the Liberals are going to continue and plan for years and years of deficits? Because thankfully the BC Greens have held the NDP to account and ensured that we've had balanced budgets these last couple of years.
Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we've actually in our platform made it very clear that by 2025 we'll be looking at a balanced budget again. And this isn't new. Deficit spending or stimulus spending, this isn't something new. There's every country in the world is going through this right now. Whether you're Canada or you're Ontario or Quebec or Alberta or whoever you are, everyone is having to borrow money right now at record interest, low interest rates. So again, you look at the historical component of this under Roosevelt's New Deal. Relief, recovery, and restructure. That's exactly what they did to re-stimulate that economy. So to answer your question, Samson, no, we're not going to borrow our way into a debt that is insurmountable. We have a plan to be debt balanced budget by 2025, and that comes from stimulating the economy and getting people back to work, getting people into good daycare. The model that we're proposing has actually been very similar to the one in Quebec, which is paid for itself. So we've got a plan, and that's the difference between us and the NDP.
Okay.
We actually have a plan.
We'll end the conversation on childcare there and move on to the next section, starting with candidate Klobuchar. If elected, what legislative initiatives will you commit to in order to protect BC's fish and wildlife populations? Do you support predator management? Will you increase funding so that more conservation officers can be hired?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and that's near and dear to my heart. There's no question about that, Dean. And what I will start by saying is that wildlife management in this province has, and it's really a nonpartisan issue when you think about it. We haven't had the correct funding since the 50s. Whether you were the social credit government or the NDP government or the BC Liberal government, we've done a very bad job of this. And when you look to the south and to states like Wyoming or Montana or even Colorado, they have had amazing success. And the reason for that is that they've been investing money. We have to start investing money back into our wild places and our wildlife. Otherwise, the East Kootenays, and I'm a hunter, and 5 years ago, I used to go out and find an elk and be fairly successful. Now, obviously, I haven't been able to find any elk because we've been in the campaign. But those numbers of ungulates have decreased dramatically. So what will we do? You better believe it. What we proposed in 2017, prior to the 2017 election, was the creation of a organization like the Freshwater Fish Society, where all tags and licenses would go directly into funding for wildlife preservation protection. But there's a bigger picture here. We've got to come up with a wildlife strategy overall, and that's what we're committed to do. Look at this from a biodiversity perspective, that everything is connected. And to your question, am I in favor of predator management? Absolutely, I am. We have done a bad job at that. We can't pick on the predators all the time because they've been here for a long time too. But unfortunately, the balance has not been there for many, many years. So we've got to make sure that we're doing the right things, and that includes predator control. But it also includes habitat restoration, it includes habitat focus, and the list goes on and on. So we are committed to that, and I'm very proud of our platform on that.
If elected, what legislative initiatives will you commit to in order to protect BC's fish and wildlife populations? Do you support predator management? Will you increase funding so that more conservation officers can be hired?
It's quite the question to ask. That's a few in there. Okay, I completely agree with Doug. We have been neglecting our fish and wildlife for far too long. BC has the most endangered species, or species at risk, in all of Canada, and yet we don't have a single piece of legislation protecting their habitat. So the first thing the BC Greens would do is pass legislation that protects our species at risk, and with that ensures that our habitats are being protected. Right now, we're logging an area north of Revelstoke, 300 acres, which is vital habitat to our mountain caribou. One of the last few herds we have left in BC. As for conservation officers, I think it's vital that we put the resources in to hire more. But more to that point, I think we need to reevaluate what we value as a society. I believe that the RCMP, having both the manpower and resources, should expand their duties to protecting and enforcing environmental regulations, the ones that we have. As for predator control, it's an issue that is larger than just the predators. The reason we have to cull the predators to maintain our other species is because we have disrupted the environment. We have destroyed their natural habitat, and we have destroyed the ecosystems. I am for managing wildlife, and that includes culling predators if need be. But we need a long-term plan that's well-funded, and I believe that's what the Green Party offers. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Charlet. If elected, what legislative initiatives will you commit to in order to protect BC's fish and wildlife populations? Do you support predator management? And will you increase funding so that more conservation officers can be hired?
One of the things that's made me really proud to be running for the BC NDP is a focus on broad-based policy decisions. And when I say broad-based policy decisions, I'm talking about enshrining our values in legislation, so that we are not just looking at the economic bottom line, but we are also looking at that environmental value of something like old growth forests, which provides essential habitat for a lot of that biodiversity that we need to protect. We were talking in our debate last night about how I think all of us have watched the new David Attenborough documentary, and it's talking about how fast we have been ramping towards this future, that we need to take a step back and really slow down what we're doing, but we need to do it in a way that doesn't leave the economy behind, that gives industry a chance to move forward and modify and modernize so that they can create better jobs for the volume of harvest that we're talking about. Now, when it comes to predator management, I used to work at a hunting outfitter before I moved to Revelstoke up in the Chilcotins, and I saw how that dynamic shifts, and when people come in, it shifts again. It's complicated. And you know who we need to listen to? We need to listen to not just the experts, but also the locals on the ground. The BC NDP have shown that willingness to talk to Indigenous populations, and they're also committing to taking a different approach, making strong investments in both our park systems and in the conservation officer service. So I'm proud to say that we are hiring about 60 more conservation officers Decisions about where those officers are placed are going to be finalized later. And I hope that I have a chance as your MLA to be there to make sure that we can fight for getting some here, to enforce the regulations that we have so that we're managing that backcountry in a really smart, big picture way.
Thank you. As we're running short on time, we're going to forgo the 5-minute open debate because I'd like to get to the rest of the questions that were submitted and selected. Candidate Boyer. During and after our health crisis, the environmental crisis continues. We see a lot of homeowners spending money on renovations, but not really thinking about energy efficiency. Do you support the BC REA recommendation to create more voluntary energy efficiency incentives for people planning renovations?
I completely agree. I think that when people are renovating, it's the perfect opportunity to think about how we can limit our CO2 emissions. The BC Green Party has a plan to support and invest in people willing to renovate, and including a plan to reduce our CO2 emissions. But more than just voluntary, I think based on the community level, I think we should work with municipalities to ensure that future renovations have this in mind. Ensure that we are thinking about how we can reduce heating costs, because at the end of the day, if you have a house that has fewer CO2 emissions, that means you're spending less on your heating bill every month, every year. So yes, I support it, and I think it's great if people choose to do it on their own, like Doug. But I think we have to work with communities to ensure that we move in that direction across the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Charlet.
I agree. These are the big picture movements that we need to make sure that every building, every new development going in is making smarter decisions so that we can hit that net zero target at 2050. So we're going to be accelerating energy efficiency retrofits now. We're going to spur those with programs and incentives for both residential and commercial buildings, including financing that allows homeowner to take out loans for efficiency upgrades and pay them back over time through their annual property taxes. These are those creative solutions that we need to be able to shift how we build. We're also going to be requiring realtors to provide energy efficiency information on the listed homes, which is going to help incentivize those energy efficient upgrades and let purchasers know what energy bills they're going to face once they get into that home. I was talking with one of my friends that is in one of the rental suites that's getting renovated here by BC Housing as part of their Housing Hub program. And she is so excited to see a much reduced heating bill this winter. So it's not just about your rent that you're paying, but I know I'm looking at probably a $1,200 to $2,000 heating bill for our rental unit. And it's because it's from the 70s and there is no incentive, there hasn't been an incentive to upgrade that and make it better. So let's make sure that we make that happen so that we have not just lower costs and better affordability, but also that we're making those choices so that we can reduce our GHG emissions and that impact on the climate.
Thank you. Candidate Klobuchar.
Yeah, thank you. What a great question that one is that, you know, COVID-19 has really started to show us that because, for example, snowbirds are not traveling, they are renovating their homes and they're putting fireplaces in, and they're putting, taking old wood burning fireplaces out and putting, you know, propane or gas. If you have gas, we don't have gas here in the valley. It's all on propane. So yeah, absolutely, we would support something like that. And we've got to incentivize it too. So when someone is actually doing a reno, I think the PST comes back into play. So when you're not, if you're buying a new fireplace and you know, you're looking at the prices and you can say, well, geez, I'd really like to have that one, but I can't really afford it because it's X number of dollars. But without that PST, you're going to be able to have the opportunity to actually buy that efficient fireplace or whatever that you're buying. Solar panels are on the increase. Since we've opened our office as a completely net zero office, you wouldn't believe how many people have come by and through us and looked at it and actually looked at the science behind it. So I think people are really interested. So we've got to do that. Energy efficient rebates plus the cheaper renos with the PST cut. I think you're going to see people starting to take advantage of that. But I also think you got to work with municipalities as well in terms of getting different codes and processes, and with the builders. But you also have to look at modernizing the BC Building Code to address the accessibility and the energy efficiency behind all of that. So it's a big issue, but it's a great question, and you betcha we're behind it.
The final question of the evening, before we go to concluding remarks, is this, starting with candidate Charlet. There are growing concerns about unregulated short-term rentals, especially in existing residential communities. What are your plans to regulate short-term rentals?
That's an interesting question. Short-term rentals can be a bone of contention because it very quickly turns into us versus them. Those who invest and have the opportunity to try and generate some income from their home, and those of us looking for a long-term rental that can't find one. Every community is struggling with how they handle this, and we've been doing the same thing here in Revelstoke, where there are only so many tools in the tool chest as a municipality for how you're going to handle this, whether it's property taxes, business licensing, zoning bylaws. It's complicated. I would love to be involved in the conversation at that provincial level to see what can we do to make this more of a solution for housing as a right rather than housing as a commodity. We've seen some improvements down in the Lower Mainland. I'm really curious to dig into what would that look like? How do we solve these challenges in our rural communities when we have so many people wanting to move here and make their lives in, whether it's Kimberley, Invermere, Radium, Golden, all of the housing prices are going up. And so that secondary suite as a rental, how do we incentivize that for those long-term rentals? A big part of that is partnering with the local governments, and that's what I've seen with the BC NDP, is giving us the funding and giving us the support to be able to come up with a strategic housing action plan that's going to provide that spectrum of housing and make sure that we protect that long-term rental base that allows our people to live and helps with affordability.
Thank you. Candidate Klobuchar.
Well, thanks, Dean. And that is a contentious issue. There's no question, no matter where you're looking. And I've obviously, as the MLA, heard a lot about that, or when I was the MLA, numerous conversations with local government elected officials throughout the riding regarding how to regulate short-term rentals. And I think what really needs to be focused on is that each community is incredibly unique. And the opportunity for our provincial government is to provide the legislation that supports the needs of individual communities, which is difficult when you, as I said before tonight, is that when you do legislations, it's usually a one kind of fits all. So we've got to look at that. But I think when you're considering the regulations around them, you've got to look at the public safety. You've got to look at the sense of the residential community itself. You've got to the respect for neighborhoods and public health and safety, and the impact that these short-term rentals have on commercial accommodators, and make sure that we're collecting applicable taxes. You know, I know that short-term rentals are some people that have them here in the riding and in the Columbia Valley here. They enable families to really access their vacation home and to keep it. Others have actually moved their rental properties out of the rental market into the vacation rental properties because of the Residential Tenancy Act that was passed by the NDP. So I think a good government takes care of both the renters, and we've got to do everything we can to take care of renters. I was a renter once too, and I know how that feels. But we also have to take care of the landlords as well to make sure that supply is there. And when you look at what's going on, it's exciting. Radium is involved in a public consultation. RDEK Area F is involved in that. Golden is involved in that. Kimberley's got a really interesting way. They're looking at and instead of regulating the buildings themselves, they're regulating the behavior and putting more teeth into the bylaws so that RCMP and bylaw enforcement officers, so it can enforce that. But it's a big issue, and my job as the MLA is to work with local government to understand what they need from us as a provincial government, and then move forward with that.
I do believe that this is very much a community and municipal issue. Yes, it touches on how many long-term rentals there are overall in our province and in our region, but as both candidates have said, all communities are unique, and I don't believe that it's the job of the provincial government to essentially force these communities to do broad strokes. In many ways, short-term rentals help our economy. They support people who own multiple homes, while at the same time allowing more tourists to come and spend their money at our local businesses. I don't think we're trying to create enemies. I think it should be the job of the provincial government to create more housing and ensure that developers who build new homes in these communities don't use them for short-term rentals, but rather ensure that they are set aside for long-term families. I know that a few jurisdictions, including Revelstoke, negotiate with developers to ensure that for at least a decade that they are sold for long-term rent, which I think is fantastic. Again, it comes down to the community's choice and the people who live there choosing what's best for them. Thank you.
So I might be alone here, but I got a big thing on my screen. And
I can see
anybody.
everybody. Nicole, can you see?
I cannot see you guys. I've got a thanks for attending the event feedback pop-up. I'm just ignoring it and assuming you can still see me there.
Oh no,
Okay.
I can see everyone, which is great.
I can see everyone as well, except for Dean, who's dropped off. So I know we're going to run out of time really fast. Can we be fast on our feet and change to 1 minute final comments from each of our candidates?
Yeah, not a problem.
We will start with candidate Boyer.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming, watching, and listening. It's been great to talk with everyone and hear ideas. Moving into the future, I hope that we elect an MLA that properly represents us and will work tooth and nail to represent us in office and make sure rural voices are heard. We are facing a climate emergency that could be the end for the next generation's future. And I hope that that is considered when you go to the voting booth. We need honesty in politics. We need to change the way we do politics. Quick question to everyone out there. How many people know the voting record of our sitting MLA? I think it's important that politicians are transparent and honest, and that's what I bring to the table. Please vote if you're looking for change and an actual future.
Thank you, candidate Boyer. Candidate Charlet, can you see the screen or not see the screen?
I cannot see the screen, but I don't need to, as long as you can see me fine.
Yep, I'll just give you an audio cue when you have 15 seconds left. Begin your time.
Wonderful. So I'd also like to thank everybody for joining us. It's this participation and engagement that gives me hope for our future. We need all the voices at the table to get creative and find the solutions we can afford to be able to move forward and really make a difference in how we live our lives. Because we can't keep doing things the way we always did. I think the pandemic has really shown that to us. So we need to slow down, listen, and focus on what really matters. Not with broad-based tax benefits that would benefit high-end countertops just as much as it would more efficient furnaces. We need to target the values that matter to us, to make sure that we reduce our emissions and hit that net zero, to make sure we make life affordable for our staff, for our customers, and for our most vulnerable. I hope that you vote this election. We have advanced polls are closing today and then election day on Saturday. And I hope that I get the chance to be your MLA and really bring that voice to the table in Victoria.
Thank you. That's your time. And Doug, you ready to start?
Yeah, you bet. Thank you very much. And again, when I was elected in 2017 as your MLA, I made two promises, and that was one, I would work my tail off for you. And I wouldn't lie to you, and the rest we'd figure out together. And I've accomplished that. I've kept my word. And we've done a lot together, and we've been so busy. I opened an office in Kimberley and Revelstoke because that's where the majority of the population was. And just in the Kimberley office itself, we've had over 300 formal files on all sorts of issues from people, and on average about 5 people a day coming in and out of that office. So we've been very busy, and I've worked with people on land use issues, on COVID related issues, and wildlife issues, and healthcare issues, on land planning issues, and we've been incredibly successful together. And I'm ready to go. This Saturday's the election, obviously, and I'm really looking forward to becoming and getting to be your MLA again, because I'll tell you what, when Monday rolls around of next week, we walk into our office and we're ready to go, and we're ready to continue to serve you. So thank you for your considerations, and I look forward to you rehiring me and continue. We can work together to get what we've
Thanks everyone for attending, and those who hung on to the end to keep watching us. I don't have all of Dean's closing comments, but thank you to each of our candidates for giving us their time this evening, and to everyone who tuned in for submitting questions and listening. And of course, nothing happens without everyone going to the polls on Saturday, so we sure hope that you take advantage of that. Thanks and have a great night.